Okay. So let's look at okay, guys, listen up, please. Okay, so as I look at, we did a lot of lessons yesterday, but they didn't take very long. So if you get on Google Classroom, we did like 38 through 42, but they were basically all reviews, so we didn't spend a whole lot of time. We're looking at page 43 today. We have 2 lessons to get through. Okay, first one we're going to look at is the quotient of a monomial and polynomial. You have a phone with you? You said no? Okay. Okay, so as I look at quotient, let's look at what this means. Quotient means what? Division, so I'm dividing. A monomial is one term, and a polynomial could be any terms. So we are taking a polynomial and dividing it by a monomial. Okay, we've done this before. I'm not going to do a ton of examples, but just kind of a quick refresher. So if I look at something like this, let's say I have 6a cubed plus 3a squared plus 4a, and I am dividing it by 6a squared. So I have a polynomial. It's actually a trinomial. I'm dividing by a monomial, one term. So if I'm dividing by a monomial, it's not super hard. Okay, it's going to get trickier when we divide by a binomial. Thank you. So as I look at example 1, okay, we did this during like the first lesson, or first unit. What do I do with this 6a squared? Divide everything by 6a squared. So take each of your terms in your polynomial and divide by 6a squared. That you can only do that if you're dividing by a monomial. Okay, and we're going to talk about if I divide by a binomial next. But if I divide by a monomial, one term, you take every term and put it over 6a squared.
So that would be like a...
Yeah, just a second. So we're going to go through each one and simplify it. 6 over 6 cancel. So if you have the same thing on top and bottom, they cancel. And then if I look at my a's, I am dividing. So what do I do with my exponents? Subtract. 3 minus 2, a to the first. So that's just going to be a. Plus, okay, we talked about this yesterday, 3 over 6. If it does not divide out, just reduce the fraction. What does 3 over 6 reduce to? 1/2. And then I have an a squared over a squared. Guys, those cancel.
So there's
No, because they have the same thing on top and bottom. Right. Plus, let's look at the next one. 4 over 6, can't take 4 divided by 6, so reduce the fraction. 4 over 6 reduces to 2/3. Now, if I look at my exponent, look at your a's. Always start a at the top. Always start your variable at the top. So 1 minus 2. -1. So that's a to the negative first. I don't want a negative exponent, so I move it to the bottom. So a plus 1/2 plus 2 over 3a. So we've done this before. If you end up with a negative, then you have to move it to the bottom. Okay, yes. You're fine. Yes. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay, let's look at another one. Let's look at this one. We'll do 2 examples. Let's look at this example. 16r cubed plus 4r squared plus 12r divided by 4r cubed. So I have a polynomial and I'm dividing it by a monomial. So I'm dividing by one term. Okay, if I look at this, we're dividing by a monomial, so take every term and write it over 4r cubed. So we're going to take each term and divide by 4r cubed. You only do this if you're dividing by a monomial. Now let's take each term and let's actually simplify it. Let's start with the first one. 16 divided by 4. 4, it actually divides out. So 16 divided by 4 is 4. R cubed over R cubed, cancel. So it's just 4. Plus 4 over 4 becomes 1. And then subtract your exponents. 2 minus 3, r to the negative first. 2 minus 3 is a negative 1. If your bottom exponent is bigger, you're going to have a negative when you subtract 2 minus 3. We'll deal with that negative in a second. The last one, 12 divided by 4, 3. 1 minus 3, negative 2. So I put that there with the 3. I don't want a negative exponent, so how do I get rid of those? Yep, so 4 plus 1 over r plus 3 over r squared. And that's your answer. So we've seen these before, just kind of a quick refresher. Now the next section, I'm just going to go ahead and do it while I'm doing notes. The next section is going to be different. We have not done these yet, so the next section is not going to be reviewed. Kind of the same idea, but you've seen it before when you took Algebra 2. But yes. Are you good? Do you have headphones in? Cayman?
I did.
Yeah, take them out. Like, put them away so I don't have to worry about it. When you ask me a question, I don't put headphones in and try to answer your question, so please. Okay, let's look at the next one. This will be the last one we do in Unit 2. We're not going to do adapting and using formulas on page 45, so you can cross those out. So you can cross out 45. Okay, Unit 2, quotient of a binomial and polynomial. Quotient is division, binomial is 2 terms, polynomial however many terms. So instead of dividing by a monomial, we are dividing by 2 terms, a binomial. Okay, and I'm going to show you 2 different ways to do this. We're going to do a couple examples, so go ahead and just leave some space. Okay, here's the first example. 7a squared plus 6a minus 13 divided by a plus 2. I'm going to show you both 2 different ways to do this. You can choose whichever way you want to. So if you want to draw a line or something, you choose which way. You don't do it both ways. Choose whichever way you want to. But I'll show you both. The first way is called synthetic division. This is really not that hard, but the first way is called synthetic division. Now you can only do synthetic if your binomial is like a plus a number or x minus a number. If this is just x or a or y, if this is just a single variable out front, then you can use synthetic. For what we're going to do in this unit, there will be. So you can use synthetic for all these if you want to. This is how we do synthetic division. It looks complicated, but I think it might be a little easier than long division. So what you're going to do, you're going to take your binomial, you're going to take the opposite number, and that's going to go in a box in the top left corner. So a plus 2, which means I will put a negative 2 in the box in the top left corner. So look at your binomial, you take the opposite sign of that number and put it in a box. Then I'm going to write numbers across the top. What numbers go across the top? Yep, your coefficients in your polynomial. 7, 6, and negative 13. Be careful. Make sure if you skip an exponent, you put a 0. This goes a squared, a to the first, a to the 0, because there's nothing there. I do not skip any, so I don't have to put a 0. Put a line, and now we're going to go through and do synthetic.
Why should we go on space?
Because we're going to put numbers there. So, to start synthetic, do I remember?
Yes.
Do what? Bring down the 7. I do 7. What do I do with the 7? 7 times the number in the box. 7 times negative 2? Negative 14. We put that underneath the 6. So there's kind of an exact procedure. So if 7 comes down, multiplied by negative 2, that goes under the next number, and then I add 6 plus negative 14. Negative 8. Now I take negative 8, multiply it by the negative 2. Negative 8 times negative 2. Positive 16. Put it under the next number. Negative 13 plus 16, 3. So the math isn't hard, you just have to remember the steps. We're multiplying, we're adding, we're doing with the negative. The math isn't hard. Now, no, you always bring it straight down. Now these are my new coefficients. Okay? So as I write my answer, how do I know what variable to start with? Remember? It's always one less. If this is a squared, you start with one less. So this will be 7a to the first. So you always start with one less than your original. So 7a to the first. This will be minus 8 plus 3. Your last number becomes your remainder. 3 over your binomial, a plus 2. And that's how you write it. So you start, these are your coefficients, and you start with one exponent less. So 7a to the first minus 8 plus your last number is your constant, 3 over a plus 2. And that's synthetic. Thank you. Are you done?
Well, I got the homework quiz.
Yes.
Yeah, I finished.
Did you start the homework quiz?
No. I was waiting for it. And now I can use that brown sheet for that? Thanks. Yeah, I got one of these out there.
Okay, so, sorry Gavin, what was your question?
So the other ones at exponents, would it just be minus 1, 2?
Yeah, so if this was 7a to the fourth, well, you just go in order. So if this is 7a to the fourth, this would be 3, 2, 1. You just go. I'll do another one like it. Yes. That's your answer. That's one way. That's synthetic. Okay, let me show you the other way, and then you can choose whichever way you want to. This way, well, I still want you writing both ways down. So this way is called long division. Okay? So long division is kind of like normal division except with polynomials. So as I write this, I have 7a squared plus 6a minus 13 divided by a plus 2. So this is more like division that you did in like elementary school, middle school, whatever. Synthetic is brand new. Long division is the same concept as when you did it in like normal long division. It's just with polynomials. So we go and we say, okay, you look at your first term. A times what gives me 7a squared? 7. A times what gives me 7a squared? 7a. So I put a 7a on top. Now I take the 7a, I take what I have on top, and I multiply it by both things out here. 7a times a, 7a times 2, so plus 14a. It's the same process as normal division. Figure out what goes on top, multiply by out front, and then put it underneath. Once I have those numbers, I change it to subtraction. So it's the same process as normal division. 7a squared minus 7a squared cancels. 6a minus 14a. Negative 8a, and then bring down the negative 13. It's the same process as normal division. And then we ask ourselves, what times a gives me negative 8? What times a gives me negative 8a? Negative 8. So I put a negative 8 on top, and then we multiply it down in front. Negative 8 times a? Negative 8a. Negative 8 times 2? Negative 16. Change that to what? Subtraction. So basically it'll change the sign. Negative 8a plus 8a, gone. Negative 13 plus 16, positive 3. That's your remainder. So just like the other one, you put it over the binomial, a plus 2. Same answer, two different ways to do it. I don't care which way you do. That's fine. I don't care. I'm just showing you both. So you can choose that. Choose whichever one. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, let's look at another one. Let's look at example 2. You choose whichever way. I want you writing them both ways down in your notes, but you can choose whichever way. Let's look at one like this. So n cubed minus 19n squared plus 95n minus 50. So now I have 4 terms in the polynomial instead of 3. Same thing. Divided by n minus 9. Yep. So there's I'm doing division, so any division you can choose long or synthetic, I don't care. Let's do synthetic first. So write them both down, but you can choose synthetic. Yep, so you can only do synthetic if it's x and a number. You can't have a number in front of the variable, so it couldn't be like 2n minus 9. So that's the downside with synthetic. But this is just for this unit, you're always going to be able to use synthetic. So this is just n minus 9. So start with your box. It's the opposite. So if it's a negative 9, it's a positive 9 in the box. What numbers do I write out across? 1, negative 19, 95, negative 50. Make sure you don't skip any. It goes into the third, n squared, into the first, and then into the 0 because it's a constant. Leave some space. Yep, bring down the 1. Yep, and then start the synthetic process. The math is doable. You just kind of have to remember that process. 1 times 9, and then add. Negative 19 plus 9, negative 10. Yep, and then multiply. Negative 10 times 9, negative 90. Add. 95 plus negative 90, 5. 5 times 9, 45. Add down, negative 5. Yep, just a second. So these are my coefficients. You should get numbers. Now just do, yeah.
Pretty much the numbers that you're multiplying by that 9 goes
Underneath.
Yeah, underneath, and then the ones that you add go below the line.
Yes, yeah.
All right.
Okay, now to start writing your actual polynomial, you start 1 degree less. The degree of the original is what?
N squared.
Cubed, so you start with n squared. So it's going to be 1n squared, just n squared. You go and then you just go down 1. Minus 10n plus 5. And then the last one is your remainder, so it goes over n minus 9. Do what? Because you go in order. N to the first, or sorry, n squared, n to the first, and this would be n to the 0. So it's your constant. Yep. And then your last one to do will be your remainder. Any questions on synthetic? Okay, go ahead and write down long, just so it's down in your notes. You can choose whichever one. But let's go ahead and look at long division real quick. So long division, let's go ahead and write it out. So it is n cubed minus 19n squared plus 95n minus 50 divided by n minus 9. So it looks messier, but it's the same process you did division in like elementary school. So let's start finding this number. What times n gives me n cubed? What times n gives me n cubed? N squared, because 2 plus 1 will give you the 3. Once you find that, multiply it by both of the things out front. N squared times n is n cubed. N squared times negative 9. N squared to negative 9n squared, because it's n squared times negative 9. Okay, let's go ahead and subtract, which means you just change the sign. Your first thing should always cancel. N cubed minus n cubed is gone. What's negative 19n squared plus 9n squared? Negative 10 n squared. Bring down the 95n. And then you do the same process. What times n gives you negative 10n squared? What times n gives you negative 10n squared? Negative 10n. And then multiply it down. Negative 10n times n. Negative 10n squared. Negative 10n times negative 9. Negative 10n times negative 9. Positive 90n. Switch the sign. So change it. Run a negative through. First thing should always cancel. Negative 10n squared plus n squared is gone. 95n minus 90n. 5n. Bring down the 50. And then ask yourself, okay, what times n gives you 5n? 5, so plus 5. And then multiply 5 times n. 5 times negative 9. Negative 45. Subtract. Change the sign. 5n minus 5n is gone. Negative 50 plus 45. Negative 5. So that's your remainder. So negative 5 over n minus 9. So you can choose whichever way you would prefer. Any questions on those? So I don't care. It's just going to say the quotient, so you can choose either way you want to. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay, that should finish out your homework. So what I want you to do the rest of the time, finish the homework. So you should be able to get the rest of the packet done. Once you get it, guys, listen up for a second. Once you get it finished, have us check it. If there's no mistakes, then I will have you start the test today. So then tomorrow you can make sure to get through the pre-test for the next unit. Because if you did perfect on the homework, you might as well just start the test.
On this one, I didn't know because this is your original.
Did you get one Friday?
Oh, is it the same one?
It's the same one, yeah. Let me turn this off real quick.